Imagine just one day, September 3rd, 2025. Think about the sheer amount of stuff happening across the globe. Huge military parades, big policy changes, tech breakthroughs, natural disasters ramping up. It really felt like a snapshot of just how fast things are moving.
It really did. A very complex picture.
So our mission here is to, go beyond those headlines. We've got sources from Reuters, AP, Bloomberg, Al Jazeera, Global News, the Hurricane Center, a whole stack. Let's try and connect some dots. What are these seemingly separate events really telling us about where things are heading?
Okay. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's kick things off with that visual out of Beijing. China staged its largest ever military parade for Victory Day, 80 years since World War II ended.
Right. A very significant anniversary.
And this wasn't just, soldiers marching. We're talking advanced weapons, hypersonic missiles, drones, Xi Jinping overseeing it all.
A massive display.
Exactly. Beyond just showing off the hardware, what was the real message here? Especially,
Right.
With the U.S.-China rivalry being what it is.
Yeah, that's the key question. Because the imagery, the tableau, as you might say, was really something. Putin and Kim Jong-un were there, right alongside Xi.
Their first time meeting in person at this specific parade, the sources said.
Correct. And that wasn't an accident. It strongly signaled a reinforced alignment between them. Analysts saw it as partly domestic theater projecting strength and unity at home, but also very much foreign messaging. A reminder to adversaries, mainly the U.S., of China's military reach.
And the timing, right, amid the war in Ukraine, U.S.-China tensions.
Precisely. Western observers were quick to warn this would just harden the existing blocs, make de-escalation even tougher elsewhere. It's a very explicit signal about global alliances shifting.
Okay, but what about that weird detail? The sources mentioned a brief offstage exchange about radical life extension. How does that fit into a military parade? It apparently went viral.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Almost surreal. You have this incredibly choreographed display of power and seriousness, and then this quick moment caught on camera about something totally different, radical life extension. Reuters called it an odd coda.
So it just kind of punctured the formality?
Sort of. It shows how fast narratives can spin off, even from highly controlled events. Maybe it tapped into some underlying, public curiosity or even anxiety about the future, even amidst all that military tech.
Okay. So while China, Russia, North Korea are showing alignment, the U.S. is sending its own signals. Across the world, President Trump met the Polish president, Karol Nawrocki, at the White House.
Right. Poland being a key NATO frontline state now.
And Trump publicly promised no withdrawal of U.S. troops, maybe even an increase, trying to reassure Warsaw, other Eastern flank allies. How significant was that particular promise?
Well, if you put these two things side by side on the same day, you see these two very distinct postures hardening. Trump's statement was definitely framed as a needed commitment to European security by supporters.
But critics had doubts.
Yeah, critics pointed out that, security depends on coherent policy and sustained funding, not just photo ops. Plus, these things always play into domestic debates in the U.S. about defense spending.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, is this a real long-term shift or more symbolic?
That's a fair point. What's the danger in relying on these public assurances without the deeper policy backing?
Well, the risk is uncertainty, really. For allies and for adversaries. If it's not backed by consistent strategy and funding, the assurance can feel a bit hollow over time. It creates a perception of strength, maybe, but without follow-through could lead to miscalculations later. It keeps things fluid.
Right. And speaking of things being fluid or maybe tense, Putin chimed in that day, too.
He did. Very striking comments. He said Ukraine had a chance for negotiations. But if talks failed, he'd end the war by force. And crucially, he said this while he was in Beijing, standing alongside Xi.
This is not exactly sounding like a compromise offer.
No. It was widely read as more of an ultimatum. The timing, again, seemed very deliberate, projecting that unified front with China.
Wow. And did this alignment have other ripple effects showing up that day?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It fits into this broader realignment. We also saw India and other global South nations reaffirming their commitment to the SKO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization.
The Beijing-led group.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Positioning it explicitly as a counterbalance to Western alliances. It's another sign that more countries are looking for alternatives outside the traditional Western framework. It's pointing towards a more multipolar world.
Okay, and this web of tension, it stretches everywhere. Let's look at the Gaza conflict. On September 3rd, Israel said it shot down Houthi missiles fired from Yemen towards Tel Aviv.
Another escalation vector.
While Israeli forces were pushing deeper into Gaza City, At the same time, Hamas repeated it was ready for a comprehensive deal on hostages.
An offer Israel dismissed as insufficient.
Right, so how do these specific actions, the Houthi missiles, the Gaza ground movements, the stalled talks, how do they all interact and make things even more complicated for mediators?
That's the core issue, isn't it? How deeply interconnected it all is. That Houthi strike from Yemen isn't just some separate event. It directly impacts the hostage talks.
How so?
Well, it likely pushes Israel to demand even stronger security guarantees, right? Which strengthens the hardliners and makes any comprehensive deal that mediators like the U.S., Egypt, or Qatar are pushing for much, much harder to land.
So one event immediately ripples into the others.
Exactly. The fighting in Gaza, the escalation from Yemen, the diplomacy around hostages, they're all tightly wound together. Pull one thread and the whole knot tightens. Makes de-escalation incredibly tricky.
Okay, let's shift gears now. Moving from that global chessboard, let's zoom in on the U.S. September 3rd also saw some really intense policy fights and legal challenges here.
Right. Some significant domestic developments.
First up, Florida. Officials announced plans to end all state vaccine mandates, including for schools.
Which would be unprecedented, really, in modern times.
Public health folks immediately warned about lower vaccination rates, higher outbreak risks. Supporters framed it as, parental choice, skepticism of government mandates. Legal fight seems certain.
Yeah.
What are the broader implications of a move like that?
Well, it really drills down into that fundamental tension, doesn't it? Individual liberty versus collective public health.
Yeah.
And it's not just Florida. It kicks off a national debate. You can bet other states are watching very closely to see what happens in schools and hospitals.
So it could set a major precedent.
It absolutely could. It might embolden similar efforts elsewhere, potentially rolling back decades of established public health practice. The stakes are really high, both for health policy and public trust.
Meanwhile, over in Texas, another controversial bill moving forward.
On abortion access, right?
Yeah. The legislature passed a bill letting private citizens sue anyone mailing or distributing abortion pills to or from Texas. Damages starting at $100,000. Governor expected to sign.
Wow. That's quite the enforcement mechanism.
Opponents are warning about vigilantism, chilling medical care, pharmacies being scared to operate, and potential clashes with federal law like FDA rules or mail regulations.
Right.
What's really notable about this specific strategy?
Well, the notable thing is how states are trying to define abortion access after Roe v. Wade fell. This Texas approach, deputizing private citizens, is a novel way to enforce a ban.
It bypasses direct state enforcement in a way.
Exactly. And it creates this whole new legal battlefield. Court challenges are basically guaranteed, and the outcome could have huge implications nationally for telehealth, for interstate commerce, even for the balance between state and federal law. It's pushing boundaries.
Okay, also on the domestic front, the Trump administration took a hard line on drug trafficking. There were warnings of more operations against cartels.
This is after that lethal U.S. strike on a vessel from Venezuela, right?
Yeah.
The one with 11 fatalities.
That's the one. Trump defended it, said it would make traffickers think twice. But the administration wasn't giving many details.
And that lack of detail, plus the lethal action itself, drew alarm from diplomats and legal experts. Concerns about escalation, about murky legal authority.
So what does this aggressive posture tell us about the wider debate over executive power?
Look, zooming out, it's definitely part of that larger conversation about the scope and the limits of presidential power.
Yeah.
The concerns about murky authorities highlight that tension between a president wanting to act decisively and the existing legal framework.
But interestingly,
Right. What's striking is that on the same day the White House is flexing muscle here, the judiciary seemed to be pushing back elsewhere. Several court actions limiting executive power.
that seems like quite a coincidence. Or maybe not. Does seeing multiple judicial pushbacks on one day suggest something bigger? A long-term shift, maybe? Or just isolated rulings?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, it certainly looks like more than coincidence. It suggests a concerted effort by the judiciary to reassert itself as a check.
What were the specific examples?
Okay, so a federal appeals court blocked the administration from using that old 18th century Alien Enemies Act to deport alleged Venezuelan gang members. The court said the situation wasn't an invasion. That's a direct check on interpreting executive power broadly.
Okay.
Then Harvard won a big case. A judge ruled the administration illegally froze about $2.2 billion in research grants over alleged anti-Semitism, called it unlawful retaliation. Again, judiciary pushing back.
And there was something about tariffs, too.
Yeah, the looming Supreme Court fight over tariffs. Trump warned the U.S. might have to unwind trade deals if they lose that case. That challenges the legal basis for some of his tariffs.
So taken together.
Taken together, yeah, it looks less like isolated incidents and more like a pattern. A significant judicial pushback against perceived oversteps in presidential authority, maybe a rebalancing act in progress.
And one more item from that day, a very different kind of call for justice. Survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse were on Capitol Hill.
Right, demanding more Justice Department files be released and pushing back against political claims that the whole thing was a hoax.
Amid a deeply polarized reaction, the sources noted, what does that tell us about where we are on issues like power, trust, accountability?
I think the deeper meaning there is how this specific case taps into and, frankly, amplifies these much broader struggles we have with sexual abuse, with power dynamics, and with trust in our institutions.
Yeah.
The demand for transparency isn't just about Epstein. It's about this wider societal desire for accountability, especially when powerful people are involved.
And the polarization.
The fact that it still gets such a polarized reaction that some people still try to dismiss it as a hoax just shows how hard it is to achieve consensus, or even just agree on basic facts in our current information environment. It highlights the long fight for truth and justice.
Okay, let's pivot now. Beyond the immediate headlines, what about those deeper currents shaping our future? Technology, the economy, the environment. Let's dig into those.
Sounds good. Major forces at play there.
Starting with tech. A U.S. judge ruled Google doesn't have to sell its Chrome browser to fix monopoly concerns.
But they do have to share certain data with competitors.
Right. Alphabet's stock jumped. Seems like courts prefer these conduct remedies, making companies change behavior over actually breaking them up, at least in some digital markets.
Yes, supporters say data sharing boosts competition. Critics doubt if companies will really comply effectively.
What's really insightful about that specific judicial approach? Is it just kicking the can down the road?
Well, what's insightful isn't just the ruling itself, but what it signals about judicial strategy towards big tech. It seems courts are leaning towards forcing data sharing instead of structural breakups. And that's a huge experiment, really. Does it actually level the playing field? Or does it just mean the big guys control the data flow they're now forced to share? It assumes regulators can effectively monitor compliance, which is debatable.
And this connects to the whole AI discussion, right? Experts on SEP3rd were talking about AI's transformative impact on jobs, skills, huge complexities.
Yeah, unprecedented complexities for the workforce.
What kind of solutions are being pushed to actually deal with that?
The main takeaway there was the urgency for proactive steps. Things like major education reform, massive reskilling programs, and critically, setting up ethical governance for AI before it completely reshapes everything.
So getting ahead of it, not just reacting after jobs disappear.
Exactly. The focus needs to be on adaptability, making sure the benefits are shared widely, not just concentrated among a few tech players.
But great tech also means great vulnerabilities. WhatsApp had to rush out fixes for a zero-day exploit.
Meaning hackers were already using it before WhatsApp even knew. Targeted Apple users.
Scary stuff. Cybersecurity experts urging immediate updates, good device hygiene, especially for high-profile people.
It's a constant battle.
And related to platform responsibility, the FTC settled with Pornhub's operator, Alo. Allegations they didn't do enough to prevent CSAM and non-consensual content.
Right? They agreed to implement a prevention program, pay $5 million to Utah.
What does this increased scrutiny on platforms like WhatsApp for security and Pornhub for content tell us about their duties?
It raises really important questions about platform responsibility, that duty to police uploads, and how you balance that with civil liberties. For WhatsApp, it's about the inherent risks in secure messaging. For Pornhub, the settlement shows growing pressure, legally and publicly, for platforms to take serious responsibility for the content they host, especially illegal or harmful stuff.
But it's hard to police everything.
Immensely hard.
Yeah.
How do you police millions of uploads effectively without violating privacy or censoring legitimate speech? It's a massive legal and ethical tightrope they're walking.
Okay, turning to the economy. We saw ConocoPhillips announce huge layoffs, up to a quarter of their staff, thousands of people, framed as strategic realignment.
A major move in the energy sector.
Meanwhile, tech stocks rallied after that Google ruling. S&P 500, NASDAQ futures up, but investors were also eyeing softening labor data.
Capturing that 2025 puzzle, as Bloomberg called it, dominant tech but uncertain macro trends.
And totally separate, Nestle fired its CEO over an undisclosed relationship with a staff member. Governance, ethics concerns there.
Right.
What are the contrasting signals here? What is this 2025 puzzle?
It really is a puzzle, a paradox. Tech is booming, fueled by innovation and favorable regulation, it seems. But then a huge traditional player like ConocoPhillips makes massive cuts, signaling anxiety in other sectors. The soft labor data adds complexity.
Yeah.
Maybe the overall job market isn't as strong as the tech rally suggests.
And the Nestle thing.
The Nestle CEO firing reminds us that even with all these big economic forces, basic corporate governance and ethical leadership still really matter for value and trust. So it's an economy firing on some cylinders but sputtering on others, forcing constant adaptation.
Finally, let's talk about the sheer force of nature and ongoing humanitarian crises. September 3rd was brutal on that front.
It really was multiple major events.
The Eastern Pacific hurricane season blew up. Hurricane Kiko hit Category 4 near Hawaii. Hurricane Lorena strengthened off Mexico, threatening floods, mudslides.
Twin major threats simultaneously.
Plus, wildfires sparked by lightning in Canada's Northwest Territories, impacting air quality way beyond the fires. Also fires in parts of Hawaii.
In Kilauea, a volcano started erupting again in Hawaii, too. Lava shooting high up.
Just relentless. And then, tragically, that major earthquake in Afghanistan. Death toll over 1,400 reported that day.
Exacerbating an already desperate humanitarian situation. Aid delivery is incredibly challenging there.
And in Lisbon, that historic funicular train derailed and crashed, at least 15 people killed, raising questions about safety standards for heritage transport.
Yeah, a terrible, terrible incident.
Looking at all these crises together, hurricanes, fires, earthquakes, accidents, what's the common thread?
I think the striking thing is the sheer frequency and severity now. These don't feel like isolated incidents anymore. They feel like symptoms of systemic stress from climate change, from aging infrastructure, from fragile political and humanitarian systems. It underscores the urgent need for better resources, firefighting, aid, but also fundamentally better disaster preparedness and more resilient infrastructure everywhere. Nature is putting immense pressure on us.
And amidst all that difficulty, we saw some efforts towards aid, but also social tensions flaring up.
Yeah, exactly. On one hand, you had an aid flotilla heading towards Gaza with critical supplies. That's a symbol of international effort of trying to help civilians.
Humanitarian impulse.
Right. But on the other hand, you had protests against mass immigration happening in Sydney, reflecting those global patterns where immigration is a really contentious issue.
So generosity and tension side by side.
Yes. Both are reactions to immense pressures, conflict, displacement, economic anxiety, demographic shifts. It shows that ongoing push and pull between global connection and local concerns.
So let's try and wrap this up. Looking back at just that one day, September 3rd, 2025, it's so clear that nothing happens in isolation, is it?
Absolutely not. All these threads, geopolitics, domestic policy, tech, environment, human tragedy, they're all interwoven in this incredibly complex tapestry.
What's the big picture takeaway then?
I think if you connect the dots from just that single day, you see these huge foundational shifts really clearly. The reordering of global power, definitely. Ongoing fights over democracy and executive power, technology evolving at breakneck speed, and these intensifying pressures from climate change and human need. It's a snapshot of the immense challenges and maybe opportunities we're facing, all happening at once.
So as you listening reflect on all this, here's something to chew on. Are these just lots of separate crises happening at the same time? Or are they maybe symptoms of a few really profound global shifts that are still playing out? It invites you to keep watching how these stories develop, doesn't it? How they continue to shape the world around us.